Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and if you can't wait for season 2 of Sweet Tooth, then this is the video for you. Though tonally, the show is quite different to the source material, there are several similarities in characters that appear in both properties. In this video, we're going to be breaking down the full comic book storyline and what happens at the end of the source material. Now, I want to tell this story chronologically, as I think that's the way it will make the most sense. In order to do that though, we actually have to start off at volume 5 of the graphic novel run. Our story begins in 1911 with an expedition to the Arctic led by Dr James Thacker. Thacker is attempting to rescue a man named Louis, who he met in medical school and who also happens to be engaged to his sister. In the wilderness, he comes across the character who kills the dogs in James's group and attempts to warn them off from following him home. They ignore this and discover that he has been living with the Alaskins and has had a child with one who just so happens to be half human and half deer. James and his group unearth an underground shrine dedicated to creatures like this, and in the native culture, they are regarded as gods. The hybrids are thought to purify the world upon their arrival, and thus the child carries a disease that's extremely lethal to humans. Louis knows this and says he doesn't want James and his group to contract it, and he sends them on their way. Unfortunately, James is a stubborn man, and there are flashes of Abbott in him, who we'll be talking about later on. James returns to the camp with his men, and they murder everyone there. They are worried that they've been infected, and think that if they manage to kill the child, the virus within them will cease to exist. Now James throws this baby into a cave and seals it up with a boulder, and then sets off back home. The virus doesn't go away though, and on the ship, he and his men die. James worried that this might all happen again, and left notes in a journal which detailed his journey. This journal is later found, and the science team at Fort Smith carry out a dig at the Alaskan site, which is where they discover the bones of the hybrids in the shrine. The Fort Smith scientists manage to recreate a living hybrid, and they call it Gus. One night, a janitor named Richard stumbles across a scientist in the lab dying, and he takes the journal of James Thacker along with the child. The disease quickly spreads, and it starts to wipe out humanity, and thus Richard heads to the Nebraskan wilderness, which is where he starts to raise Gus on his own. Richard starts to read the journal and slowly becomes more and more convinced that it prophesizes the end of humanity. He teaches Gus life skills, but lies to him about the rest of the world and says that the entire planet is on fire to keep him in the enclosure. The boy has nightmares of a tall man who is coming to get him, and his father slowly succumbs to the sick and dies at the cabin. Now dreams play a big part of the comic. There's often this prophetic use of them which tells the future and also allows characters across great distances to connect with one another. Gus ventures out into the woods, and here he's almost killed by hunters. However, a man named Jeopard arrives and saves his life, and he promises to take him to a sanctuary called the Preserve, filled with people just like him. The pair set off on the road and run into some cultists dressed as animals, and whereas in the show these are the animal army led by Bear, here they're malevolent forces that Jeopard ends up killing. Jeopard gets brutally damaged by them and almost bleeds to death, but Gus saves his life, and after eating all of his chocolate, Jeopard nicknames him Sweet Tooth. Whilst making their way to the Preserve, they come across a man and woman who we discover are holding girls hostage and forcing them into a life of prostitution. Jeopard ends up killing the man, but a woman named Lucy steps forward to murder the female. They hint that the Preserve isn't what Gus thinks it is, and this turns out to be true when Jeopard takes Gus there. What we find are repurposed barracks that have been turned into somewhat of a concentration camp. Now it's at this point that we sort of get Jeopard's backstory, and we learn that before the plague swept humanity, that he was a hockey player. His wife fell pregnant, and when society started to collapse, they went out into the world. On the road they were attacked by hunters, but a man named General Abbott managed to save the pair. He appeared to be friendly at first, but upon arriving at the base, he locked Jeopard in a cage and started to experiment on his wife Louise. Jeopard was visited by a man named Johnny, who we learned was General Abbott's brother. He struck up a friendship with him, and eventually Johnny let him free. Jeopard found his wife about to give birth, and he learned that Abbott and a man named Dr. Singh had been experimenting on pregnant women and the hybrids in order to find a cure for the sick. Jeopard went toe to toe with Abbott, but he was easily bested. Abbott then threw him out the camp and told him that his wife and child died in labour. Jeopard always promised to take his wife home, and Abbott said that he would give him her bones in exchange for a hybrid child. Now it turns out that Jeopard hasn't been the kind guardian that we thought, and upon arriving at the Preserve, he hands Gus over to the General. It's a big gut punch, I think this is where the series massively differs from the comics. In my ending explained video, I said the show feels somewhat a kidified version of the source material, and though I really enjoyed the first season, things are pretty bleak from the outset in the graphic novel. Gus meets the other captives there, namely a pig girl named Wendy, a groundhog called Bobby, and another deer boy who we learn is called Buddy. Gus then meets Dr. Singh, a disheveled man who realizes that Sweet Tooth is something special after seeing that he doesn't have a belly button. Throughout the first volume, Gus constantly talks about how he's 9, even though the hybrids only emerged 7 years ago. No one really believes him, but this revelation shows that he might have been created in a lab. Singh hypnotizes him, and in his subconscious, Gus tells him of his home and where it's located. Singh and Abbott head there and discover Thacker's journal. Singh becomes absolutely obsessed with it, and he starts to believe that Gus is actually a god. At the camp, Johnny befriends the kids, and he lets them free. They head to the sewers, and in the underground, they're attacked by what seems to be a crocodile. Gus kills it, and it's only after doing this that he realizes it's actually a hybrid child like them that was just hiding out below the base. Now during this escape, Gus has a shared dream with Jeopard, and the two meet face to face. Using their psychic connection, they manage to talk to one another, and right now, I'm using my psychic connection to make you like the video. Also yeah, if you're enjoying the breakdown, then don't forget to subscribe as we do videos like this every day. Anyway, now it turns out that since leaving the camp, Jeopard actually returned home and buried his wife. After feeling the guilt and shame of what transpired, he returned to Lucy, and we learned that she and the other girls were experimented on at the preserve. They agree to go and save the children, and together they all head out. Jeopard also starts to work with a group known as the Animal Army, who you will of course know from the show. Now where things differ from the more cuddly game-playing TV show counterparts is that the Animal Army in the comics is a cannibalistic cult. Their leader has several dog hybrid children, and we learn that when his wife gave birth to the first, that she tried to kill it. However, he stayed her hand, and she ended up giving birth to 4 more almost immediately after. This completely exhausted her, and the leader made the pups feed on her body whilst she was still alive. They're the ultimate psychopaths, but because they don't hate the hybrids, Jeopard sees them as allies. During this time, Gus and co are captured, and they are taken back to the camp. Jeopard storms it, and the first place they go to is of course the kennels. Here they rescue most of the kids, but the cult leader sicks his dogs on Buddy. Lucy tries to save him, but Jeopard pulls her away and says that they have to leave him, which is where Buddy says Dada. We learn that this is actually Jeopard's child, and that Abbott lied about him dying. Jeopard has very much left his child to die, and I think that in season 2 it will be revealed that one of the children at the end is his kid. I think the main structure of season 2 will be based around Jeopard storming the camp with Amy, and they may even call on Bear to help reform the Animal Army in order to lead the charge. How I think the season will culminate is exactly the same way as the book does, and at the base, Jeopard comes face to face with Abbott once more. He's bested again, but Johnny saves him and blows off his brother's fingers with a rifle. The group escape with Singh, and though we think that Buddy is dead, it is revealed that he's not. Abbott saves his life and ends up taking him captive. He also kills the Animal Army leader and takes his dog children under his command. Out in the wilderness, some of the girls spring a trap, and a crippled man named Walter arrives and saves their lives. He takes them to a giant dam, which he tells Lucy was a location headed up by an organization called Project Evergreen. Walter says that the woods surrounding the dam are extremely dangerous, and that they're littered with savages led by a ruthless man named Haggerty. He says that they'll be safe in his dam, and that they can live there with everything they need, but it does seem too good to be true. Gus is attacked by a bear and dragged off back to its cave, but Jeopard arrives and manages to kill it. Now here Jeopard starts to suspect that something is off with Walter, and things get a lot worse for the group. During this time, Lucy also begins to succumb to the sick, and Singh has a revelation. Upon reading the journal, he comes across the prophecy that a malevolent entity known as the White Demon will kill Sweet Tooth, and he believes that this is Jeopard. One day when they're outside, the group are seemingly attacked by what they believe to be Haggerty's men. Around this time, Jeopard also takes Gus out into the woods, and he confesses that he killed a crocodile hybrid boy and says that he regrets it. Just before Jeopard fully consoles him, Gus is shot by a mysterious rifleman and he's taken back to the dam. Dr. Singh has to operate on him in order to save his life, and he's given a blood transfusion from Wendy. During this, he has a dream about going to the Arctic that pretty much fills in the blanks about Thacker's expedition. Here he comes across Thacker's massacre and also discovers the murdered hybrid from the start of the story. Though he's saved, everything comes to boiling point and tempers flare with Jeopard going wild on Walter. He tells him to drop the act and says that he knows he's lying. Jeopard is kicked out of the dam, and from here he ends up living in the surrounding woods. Gus and Singh visit him regularly, but it's clear that those back at the dam want nothing to do with him. Gus says he wants to take him to Alaska, but Jeopard says no and continues to go off into the woods on his own. Here he stumbles across a camp that initially seems like it's full of Haggerty's men. However, this is actually Project Evergreen, and it's revealed that Walter is in fact Haggerty. We discover that Haggerty came to the dam one day and pretended to be a kind man. However, he lied, and when they left the base to go hunting, he killed the real Walter and took his wife and daughter. He put Walter's body at the door as a warning, and we never learn what happened to either of the women. However, Walter's daughter had a pig toy that looked a lot like Wendy, and she herself had a lot of similarities to Becky, one of the girls in the group. Now it turns out that Haggerty has been waiting for most of the men to leave, and he launches his attack. He beats the crap out of Johnny and ties the girls up. Lucy is at death's door and far too weak to fight back, and it seems like they're now completely doomed. Jeopard heads out there immediately, but on the roads his car overturns. Luckily, he's saved by a man called Fat Man, who just so happens to be a rival hockey player from years ago. At this time, Singh kidnaps Gus and starts driving north, but Gus manages to escape and he heads back to the dam. Jeopard and Fat Man ice skate there, and together they manage to defeat Haggerty. Lucy is instrumental in taking him down, but unfortunately it proves to be too much and she dies in Jeopard's arms. Haggerty heads out into the woods around the area, and when they bury Lucy, they discover his body. Project Evergreen returns to the dam, and Johnny and Bobby decide to remain there. Bobby needs to hibernate, and they're just not ready for the rest of the journey to the Arctic. Now during all of this, Abbott has been tracking the group with the dog hybrids. He arrives at the dam and then kills all of Project Evergreen. It's here that we really get his and Johnny's backstory, and we learn that their father was a cruel man that used to beat Johnny badly. His brother would often stay his hand, and when the plague hit, Abbott was called to go and defend the Canadian border. Johnny remained behind to care for his dad, whose condition slowly got worse and worse, and when he went out looking for supplies, he was attacked by strangers. Abbott ended up saving his life, and he told him that he'd killed their father so that Johnny could be free, and they ended up travelling to an army barrack. Abbott killed the leader there and took over the command, and eventually this turned into the preserve. Though Johnny repeatedly broke his brother's rules, he constantly let him off, and because of this, Abbott realised that he was his one weakness. Abbott starts to interrogate him to find out where the rest of the group have gone, but he refuses to give them up. They've been through this numerous times, and Johnny says he knows that his brother won't kill him, but Abbott shoots him in the head at point blank range. Bobby runs out into the wilderness, and Abbott catches him, and he tells him that everyone has gone to Alaska. Abbott throws him in with Buddy, and at Alaska we find Singh retracing Richard's footsteps. This very much fills in the details of the outbreak, and Singh starts to see himself as someone who's been trying to cure the virus, rather than ushering the path in which it will purify the earth. Jeopard, Gus and the rest of the group arrive in Alaska, and here they discover the truth about the hybrids and of course the virus. Bobby is sent into town as a warning from Abbott, and the survivors decide to make a last stand. Fat Man and Jeopard set traps in the town, and here they go head to head with Abbott's forces. Fat Man is killed, and Jeopard realizes that this was all a distraction and that Abbott has really gone to the lab. He and Singh head there and find Abbott holding Gus and his son hostage. He says that he must choose between the two, but before Jeopard makes a decision, several hybrids from the town arrive and help to kill Abbott's forces. Abbott grabs Buddy and heads into the lab, and Jeopard goes after him. Unfortunately, he slips and breaks his leg, and just as he's about to kill him, Abbott asks why he's doing all of this. Jeopard says that it's because he loves the hybrids, and it's at this moment that Gus arrives and kills Abbott. Sadly, Jeopard dies from his wounds, and in his last words, he tells Gus to look after Buddy. Now, we then get somewhat of a redo with a boy that looks like Gus out in the woods being chased by hunters. He's grabbed by another hybrid who looks slightly like a cross between Wendy and Gus, and we learn that this character is called Tommy. Tommy was actually the first name of Jeopard, and he leads the child away as the hunters pursue. They're killed by what's revealed to be an older Sweet Tooth, and we learn that these two children are in fact his sons. It turns out that when the group left Alaska, they returned to Nebraska, namely where Gus was raised. Here they built a community, and Gus fell in love with Becky. Unfortunately, she died from the sick, and he ended up starting a relationship with Wendy. Humanity is on its last legs, and Buddy arrives to say that the last men are launching a war party to try and take the hybrids out once and for all. Gus is initially wary about whether they're attacking or not, and he believes that they just want shelter. However, he does eventually meet Buddy on the battlefield in order to fight them off. It's a landslide for the hybrids, but rather than killing the humans, they offer them safety and shelter. They don't want any more deaths and allow them to live with the hybrids for the next couple of years. Slowly, humanity succumbs to the sick, and Gus and co bury the last of them. They have learned from our mistakes and want to make the world a better place. Gus's children head out into the world, and he has many grandkids. He recounts stories of the tall man and adventures as a child to them in his home, happy with his family and the world he's helped to create. Gus dies in his chair as an old man, and the book ends with the spirit of Jeopard taking his young soul away to heaven. It's a touching end to this incredible story. I swear it gets us every time, this bit, but I'm not crying now. Now, the graphic novel is incredible, and if you enjoyed this video, then I definitely recommend that you pick it up. It's easily one of the best releases this side of the millennium, and though the show changes things up, I think the core story is absolutely incredible. Now obviously I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, so make sure you comment below and let me know. As a thank you for interacting with the video, you'll be entered into a prize draw on the 30th of June, in which we're giving away 3 copies of the MCU Phase 3 box set. All you have to do to be in with a chance of winning is like the video, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on the series. The winners of last month's competition are on screen right now, so if that's you, then message me on Twitter at HeavySpoilers. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of the series itself, which will be linked on screen right now. We went over the full first season from top to bottom, so it's definitely worth watching if you want to know more. With that out of the way, thank you for sticking through the video. I've been Paul, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.